Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello everyone and welcome along to the RTGA podcast. Football time again, and Kieran Whelan is with myself and Rory to look ahead to the weekend's fixtures. How are you keeping, Kieran?
Yeah, good, Jackie. Yeah, looking forward to another weekend of plenty of debate and talk around the new rules. So yeah, it should be interesting. Plenty of bad weather on the way as well. So another good weekend to look forward to. Yeah, all good.
Yeah, I think the weather has probably helped with some of the drama that we've had as well. 4 games this weekend in Division 1. You've got Galway, Donegal, Tyrone, Kerry, Armagh, Mayo and Dublin, Derry. Let's start with the 2 informed teams then, Kieran, because I think maybe people expected that Donegal were going to bring something, but to have beaten the last 3 All-Ireland champions on their first 3 weeks out has been maybe even more impressive than people thought they were going to be.
Yeah, well, to be honest, you kind of anticipated that they were going to be kind of ahead of the curve, Jackie. You know, it was obvious they got a fair bit of pre-season training into them. You could certainly see, you know, their conditioning levels is definitely a step or two ahead of everybody. I think that's quite evident even in terms of their work rate and how they're defending the arc. And I also think definitely one of the things that was evident for me in the first couple of weeks was they were kind of also ahead of the curve maybe in their thinking around the new rules and the use of the new rules. You know, they've continued their possession-based game, you know, but they've been quite smart in how they wanted to defend the arc and protect against 2 points. Their transition with that level of condition has been brilliant. But ultimately, when you tie it all down, the quality of their shooters, the quality of their forwards, they have such a range of guys that can, and I think that's been the big distinct difference between some teams. You know, even looking at the likes of Dublin last week and Kerry and the other bigger teams, you can identify 3 or 4 kind of key shooters where on those teams, where Donegal have excellent guys that can take on shots. And I think their movement in and out of the arc has been very good. They've been very good coming forward, where they're getting probably the not most prolific shooters into that arc. They're dragging men in with them. And then the likes of Paddy McBurty's coming on the loop, Usheen Gallen's playing out around the arc. The O'Donnells have been excellent. Kieran Thompson, we know, can kick points for fun. Darrell Boyle. You know, the list is that. Ryan McHugh coming forward. The list is endless in terms of their ability. So they've been excellent in everything they've done. But listen, it's early. We're still in February, and we all fall into this trap every year. It's very early, and I think teams, in terms of level of conditioning, are gonna evolve and are gonna improve radically in the next couple of months, and things will level out. But so far, from a Donegal perspective, if you're a Donegal supporter, you're looking forward to this year with great energy and excitement. And we saw the man that returned last week, Michael Murphy. You know, I was actually amazed because, you know, sitting back and watching it, to be out of the game for 2 years, he would have felt a lot of pressure coming back, and probably there'll be question marks in his own head, and he kind of gets that first ball and he's on his left-hand side, and you're thinking, you know, here's the first test, boom, over the bar. And then he went on to have a massive influence on the game, looked to the best shape that he's ever been in. So he's a huge added bonus to them as well. So yeah, they're going to be very, very optimistic. They go to Galway this weekend. Really, you know, when you look at the league, will they start looking at different guys now if they're points in the bag? But if they put out a strong outfit, even though Galway have been excellent, and probably a little bit, you know, maybe reliant on Shane Walsh and his 2-pointers, still think Donegal, if they have a strong team out, might just edge that one. But they're in good shape. A long way to go. I wouldn't be getting too carried away just yet.
Yeah, I'd say maybe the same message there for Galway though, Rory, as well, because they've definitely been in good shape. Kieran's right, you know, maybe they are still finding their rhythm that doesn't have just Shane Walsh at the centre of it, but I think Pádraig Joyce will be happy enough, and I do think this is a nice test for both of these teams this weekend.
Yeah, and it's I think, look, they're on 5 points. I think Donegal are on 6 at this stage. The Division 1 is a funny league in that you do, as Wheeler mentioned there, you do see teams come out of the blocks quickly and look to try and climb the ladder to get to that kind of 6-point mark as early as possible. And then you might start seeing, I'm not necessarily saying they'll start to, you know, ease off or potentially look to sort of, pull back a little bit. But look, it's a long year for Donegal. We know that they're out in the preliminary game in Ulster a week after the league final. So there's a bit of planning there to be done from a management perspective. You look at his track record thus far since he's come back in from Jim McGuinness's point of view, won the Ulster Championship, won Division 2, made an All-Ireland semi-final where they were beaten by Galway, and that was a fantastic game played obviously under the old rules. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see the comparison this weekend. Now, weather, as you've mentioned, is a factor. The forecast is bad. It's lashing rain here in Dublin as we speak. So who knows what it's going to be like at the weekend in a place like Salt Hill on a pitch that is struggling a little bit. But from Galway's perspective, I think, look, I don't think he's going to be unhappy. He has had a full range of players to pick from for the first time in a while. They don't seem to have as many injuries as they've had in the past. Comer is still yet to come back. He is almost like a sort of a totemic type figure in the way that Murphy is for Donegal. So I think he'll make a huge difference, and it'll be fascinating. It'll be equally fascinating to see him get a handle on these rules when eventually he does return. But I think they're in a good shape. I think it's the game of the weekend in loads of different ways. And one we're all looking forward to.
Yeah, I think that's the game of the weekend, definitely. At the other end of the table, if you think both of them are absolutely flying, you look at Tyrone and Kerry, Kieran, and you're wondering, does one win kind of change everything? And, Rory's right. The whole dynamic of this is you get a win and suddenly you're safe. And then I don't think Jack O'Connor would be too bothered about being in a league final either, but they'd sort of feel like they were settled. I think for Tyrone, they're still getting players back. It's an awkward phase for both teams, knowing that they have to get a win on the board, but also they don't really have their full pick yet either.
Yeah, well, I suppose, listen, Kerry, David Clifford came back last week, and you could probably argue that Kerry are probably not that far off full strength, missing a few, like I said, Brosnan, Gavin White, Moynihan, that sort of stuff. They still have a few to come back, and they've been introducing new players, Naginis. But I think it's an interesting dynamic, Jackie, that really, when you look closely at Kerry, they possibly should be 0 out of 3. And they were very, very lucky up in Derry. I suppose they stole that one. That was a smash and grab. And I would worry a small bit about Kerry defensively, just even in the new game with it a little bit more open. I thought some of their maybe lack of pace and man-on-man contests in the first 2 rounds, they were exposed a little bit. And I don't know whether that fed into their a little bit over-conservative approach against Dublin in the first half last week, where they went kind of quite zonal and they were looking for those additional protections, and they went deeper, and they didn't have maybe the confidence maybe to push out, because they have been conceding quite a bit and conceding easy scores. And then, you flip to the second half last week and you're thinking they're 5 points up, and you're saying, you're looking at them, you're saying Dublin are going to need 2 pointers to win this. You have to try, push out, you have to get pressure on. That work ethic has to be there. You have to get across. It wasn't there, and Dublin were able to create that overlap, particularly over on the stand side, and get those chances. So I think Kerry have a bit of work to do, particularly defensively. We know they'll have the forwards and stuff like that, and it's a tough trip going up to Tyrone, because, as you say, Tyrone on the flip side look to be, they got to win on week 1. I would still strongly feel Tyrone will have a significant say in this championship later on in the year. I think the quality of the forwards, that they obviously their shooting was a bit array last week. They dropped a good few short. They missed a lot of chances. They have a lot of quality to come back into that forward line. They have a strong midfield. They've additional players back in the defence. They have a lot of depth with young players coming through. I think Tyrone are going to continue to improve. I think they've had a little wobble the last couple of weeks. They probably are behind the curve a small bit compared to other teams maybe. I think they'll get the work done and they'll improve radically. So it's an interesting test. Like, if Tyrone get the 2 points at home, they're up to 4 points then, and you're one step away from safety. But I think Tyrone will improve this week, and particularly at home, it's a tough trip for Kerry. Kerry have 3 of their last 4 games away from home. It's a tough track for them, and I think they have a lot of improving to do. There was a huge sense of, I suppose, not shock, but after the match last week, the second half, Dublin's comeback, people were kind of gobsmacked, really, I think, with the second half performance, that Dublin put a lot of pressure on them in the middle third, turned them over, and they never got their offensive game going in the second half. And, David Clifford was kept quiet when he came on, and like they got 2 points in the second half. That's a poor return. So when you look at, they're struggling a small bit up front, and then those defensive issues they have, Kerry have a lot of work to do, in my view.
I think it's the nature of that defeat, Rory, because they were home and hosed. What were they, 11 points up at half time? Kerry teams just don't do that. It's the character of this team that was questioned in the aftermath of that, and that's the difficulty for them.
They do seem to be treading water. Like, I don't know whether it's the combination of the new rules, it's the fact that we haven't really seen a huge amount of new faces. The management team have been there on his third spin for, and this is year 3. Yeah, like Mike Quirk was in there for a while. He's exited. You had Paddy Talley in there. He's gone, obviously, to take over up in Derry. I don't know. I listen, far be it from anybody from Cork to be ever worried about Kerry, right? But I just think that there seems to be a sense that they're just sort of treading water. And like, I didn't realize that, actually, and I probably should have checked it. Like, that's a really stark prospect for them, the fact that they're 3 of their last 4 matches, they're on the road. So, like, we know Tyrone absolutely loved the sight of them coming. And if there was ever a time for Tyrone to sort of kick into gear, maybe the Aragall lads are back this weekend as well. You would imagine that's time enough now before they start easing their way back onto the county panel. Yeah, it's a tough assignment for them to try and kind of, and Wheeler's point is well made. They've one they've one victory on the board, which you could possibly argue was a little bit fortuitous. So they probably do need to find some caliber of form, but it's a long year ahead. They know they'll probably coast through the Munster Championship. They won't necessarily have to pull up too many trees to navigate that, for whatever that's worth. And look, their real focus will be when this round robin kicks in June.
Do you know what's funny, Kieran? Enda had a sort of a similar feeling about Dublin when he was on the podcast on Monday, and he was kind of saying, they're kind of tipping away. They won that game that, they were kind of blown out of in the first half, and maybe they shouldn't have. And, he kind of felt maybe they were still looking for a lot as well. But because of the provincial structure and because they don't have to find any sort of gears for the next while, he kind of felt that maybe they're in the same position as Kerry, that they're in a little bit of flux. They might be in a bit of bother, but they're able to kind of get away with it because of they've got a couple of wins on the board now.
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with that. Like, Dublin are far from the finished article, considering the gaps that they have to fill and the players and the quality they've lost and the leadership they've lost. Last week was a good step, I suppose, in terms of progress. But Desi Farrell, I suppose, touched on it after the match that they weren't interested in results. They've got their 4 points. They're interested probably in performance and finding new players and giving new players opportunity. I think we'll see him continue to do that. The Coola contingent probably coming back into the equation now. Niall O'Callaghan came on last week. Whether, we'll see the likes of Ethan Dunn, who's very good in the Sigerson, or Peter Duffy, Patrick Coffey-Born, I don't know whether he's potentially travelling. So they're definitely going to try a lot of players, Jackie. I think he would have been really pleased with the performances last week of new guys that were integrated. Particularly like Luke Branagh coming off the bench and to showing that leadership to take on those shots. And Lorcan O'Dell's been tipping around for a few years. Theo Clancy got a great run out, 20 minutes, and David Clifford last week, kept him. That's going to give him massive confidence, because he's a player that I would rate highly. I've seen him come through in the under-20s, and I think he's a quality player, and he's been excellent for Crokes. That's going to give him a huge boost. So I think, from Desi's perspective, it's really finding new players. Dublin have plenty of work to do still. While the breeze played a factor in the second half last week and Shane Ryan's kickouts came out, Kieran Kilkenny was the one that was competing for a lot of them. And I still feel that they have an issue in that area where they have to find, whether it's Brian Howard that goes in there, but we have to find some sort of able replacement for the likes of Brian Fenton. It was just going to be a massive loss. So Dublin are absolutely work in progress. They're happy with the 4 points they have in the bag. They're Derry coming to town, and this time last year, Derry were flying. You know, they've shown flashes. You know, good second half last week. They are a team that seems to be embracing the new rules, where they're trying to push out and press high up the field, and they're trying different facets of the game to see that they work. They were probably unlucky not to beat Kerry. They were flat the first day against Tyrone, but you know, they'll come up and they're looking to build, and they probably just need, you know, outside of Shane McGuigan in the forward line, you know, they need probably more scores. Lachlan Murray was very good last week. They probably need a better spread of scores, but they're coming up. But I think from Dublin's perspective, they're just, Desi's happy, 4 points in the bag. It's introducing new players. He'll still want that attitude and the hard work ethic that they really brought to that middle third last week. That's what he'd be looking for on Saturday night. The result mightn't be that important. And I suppose we sat here for the last 2 years and we're talking about new structures and how important it was to stay in Division 1. And we've seen the impact league finals had and how compact the season is now. And maybe the focus on results has diluted a small bit because everyone's trying to get used to new rules. There's a hell of a lot going on, I suppose.
Yeah.
If you get your 4-6 points, you're happy enough. But Derry will be looking to improve this weekend, and you know, they could well put it up to the Dubs, I'd say.
And I do think Kieran's right, Rory. If you look back on where Derry were a year ago, I'm sure they'll have learned an awful lot about going so hard in consecutive seasons, trying to get up early for a league, and then just, you know, maybe faltering towards the end of the season too. So they'll know with the same group of players pretty much what the lessons have been for the last few years.
I was very skeptical though last year when I saw them going as hard as they were early on in the league about their ability to sustain it, just purely on the basis that they're sort of anchored in a big way by the Glen players who had been on an absolutely mammoth journey with a huge amount of club football played in the off inter-county season. And I thought it was probably setting your stall out a little too far early on. And look, was it the reason why they blew up in the championship? I'd say that's probably a more complicated answer. I think the one game last year in the league that was fantastic was above in Celtic Park when Dublin went up and had a really excellent win. And they've generally produced really good contests. I think that we should get the same. The pitch won't be an excuse on Saturday night. A good double header as well with the hurlers on beforehand at 5 o'clock, so the crowd should be sizable. I think for both teams it'll be an opportunity to go at it. Like, I think from Dublin's perspective, it will be also interesting to see whether or not we get the Coola lads back, finding one or two players, as Wheelo said, and try and flesh out the panel a little bit more. I do wonder sometimes if there's another big tall midfielder from Raheny sitting down wondering, who's only 31, going, Jenny, like, I wouldn't mind having to cut off these rules, you know.
I think he thought about that and said, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'd say he's getting asked that question everywhere he goes.
Everywhere he goes. Yeah.
But no, I think he seems to be quite content in his own skin and made that decision. But listen, the real test, I think, will come the summertime when he's sitting in the stand.
That's it.
But,
yeah. I would guess, from judging by the little that I know that fella, he will not be sitting in the stand and taking that on. He'll be trying to find himself a corner somewhere to hide away from the madness of all that. Because that is, I mean, listen, you know, Kieran, as much as anybody, that's the hardest part because the fans want him out there.
Yeah, but listen, stepping out of that bubble is really tough, you know, for any inter-county player. And I suppose, okay, he's had some success, but he's stepped out of the bubble and he still is possibly the best midfielder in the country.
He's not. There's no possible about him.
But there was no signs of any decline. There was no signs. So he's gone out at the top. And every Dublin fan will hope that he misses it and there's a graw for it and he might just reconsider. Absolutely. That's always on everyone's mindset, because the new rules kind of would help him, particularly with the aerial battle now becoming much more prevalent in terms of the long kickouts and his ball winning ability. And, you know, he'd lap it up in that area. But listen, Jackie, we can only hope and dream and persuade.
Keep at it there, Kieran. Keep at it. There's a long year there ahead. Come here, let's finish off these games then with the All-Ireland champions, because I am keen to know, they obviously have Mayo this weekend, Kieran. How you're feeling about them? Are they bubbling nicely under the surface after the start that they've had? Or do you think there's more to this team that is still, I guess it's like any All-Ireland champions. Anytime they have a bump in a road, do people say, oh, they're not as good as they were last year?
Yeah.
Or is it that you have to kind of give them a bit of a pass to get up to speed as well?
Yeah, I still think they still have the quality. And I'd say it's taking them probably a little time to embrace maybe the rules and the change in the game. We all know they weren't that for it, and that's understandable.
Yeah.
When after getting to the Holy Grail, you kind of see what works for us. We had a very strong defensive system. We were transitioning the ball very well. We kicked it when we had to, when there's a bit of variety, and it worked for us. So I suppose there's an element of reset with them. They've blown Tyrone, out of the water. The game against Galway, you could argue that they played reasonably well, and the kind of result went against them with a few 2-pointers in over a few minutes. Just looking at them last week, I thought like Donegal were a good step ahead of them, and I thought they lacked a bit of potency in the forward line without the likes of Rory Gruben, who really makes them tick. He's their leader in there, and also the elephant in the room with Rian O'Neill missing. What the leadership he gives in the forward line, and obviously they've other injuries, so they've a lot of players to come back. But that was the obvious thing for me last week, that I thought while they kicked a couple of 2-pointers, Ben Creedy got one, and I think Andrew Moran got one, and it looked they were back to within 2 points, and you were thinking, they could get back into this game. The sending off obviously twisted back in Donegal's favour, and Donegal were comfortable. So I don't think Armagh again are too bothered about the league. I think they'll have enough. They'll get their 4-6 points. They have enough quality. They have the structure there. They have a very good counter-attacking game. So I'd expect that they'd win this weekend. I think for me, Mayo, very poor game last week, but I would be very concerned about Mayo's forward line and their ability to get scores. And they just really seem to be struggling, particularly around the outside of the arc in terms of their creativity and movement and getting lads on the ball. Yes, they've introduced a few of the young lads, and they've a bit of experience coming back last week, and Aidan O'Shane, Ryan O'Donoghue, they will get better. But they didn't do anything last week that would indicate to me that they're going to go up and turn over the All-Ireland champions. And I think Armagh will have enough for them at the weekend.
Yeah, I'd say that's a popular opinion, Rory, based on what everybody's seeing from Mayo so far.
Yeah, and I think Wheelo made it an interesting observation there in relation to how much is going on and all the noise that's been going on, particularly around Gaelic football. And I'd say you could nearly double that from an Armagh perspective. We know, look, there was reports of an issue on the team holiday. They've got to deal with the razzmatazz of being All-Ireland champions. They've then got to reset, refocus, and come into a new league campaign with all of that hanging on top of them. And they have potentially a star player. People don't know whether or not he's playing, he's coming or going. You throw in the new rules, which we know they haven't been a fan of. And then obviously their captain gets sent off last week. So there's a lot. That's a lot to deal with before you even set foot on the field. And there's still loads of quality there. They're going to be at home. I think that is always worth something for them, especially given the size. And the other thing we forgot to mention is, now it doesn't necessarily affect them, is the hoo-ha around their championship fixture against Antrim. That's more of an Antrim issue than an Armagh issue, but they're obviously the opponent on that occasion. So there's an awful lot for them to be dealing with. I think this weekend, I think though, Mayo look to me like they're lacking. They're lacking in something, and I'm not entirely sure. If I was to pick the weakest team in Division 1, I'd probably go for Mayo on the basis of what we've seen so far.
Yeah, fair enough. One last brief word, Kieran, then. I know GAA Congress doesn't get the blood flowing for everybody, but there is just one, I suppose from a football perspective, there's a couple of things. One, that they're looking at another structural change, which I don't know, maybe the GAA need to be given some credit for saying, we've tried this necessarily didn't work. We're looking at maybe doing something else and abandoning the group system, going for more of a qualifier system. And on one sense, you're saying, let's applaud the ingenuity that's allowing this to constantly evolve. But on another sense, I'm sure people are going, oh my God, more structure change. What are we doing with this game? Which it must be challenging.
Yeah, well, at least, Jackie, we haven't had to discuss structures this year because we've been discussing the new rules instead, after 10 years of talking them through. But no, I think these changes, I think, were flagged last year. And I think anybody that has sat back and watched the group systems, they haven't worked. Let's be honest. I remember last year I was in Croke Park for Dublin Roscommon, and like there was only a few thousand there. I never saw a smaller crowd. It just hasn't energised. And I know we had issues with the quality of our game, but they haven't worked. And there was the lack of jeopardy was a key factor. And I think obviously this is letting the changes is letting the calendar breathe a little. It's bringing immediate. Okay, you still have an extra chance through the qualifier system, but if you're successful, if you stay in the qualifiers, you get that little breather as well throughout the season. You're not kind of back to back. So I think it's to be welcomed, because I don't think the group system didn't, get the imagination or the buzz flowing at all, being honest. So I think these are rules being brought forward by Central Council. I think they'll pass. They're tweaks that I kind of needed. It's not really radical. It's not really radical. Like the structures between how the teams flow into the Tailteann and Sam pretty much stay the same. And it's just giving the calendar a little bit to breathe and taking that, bringing a little bit more jeopardy into all those qualifiers. So I think it's welcome, and I think it will flow through. Yeah.
Good. Fair enough. All right. Listen, plenty of time for us to get stuck into everything that comes out of Congress over the weekend, but we'll leave the football there. And Ciarán, thanks a million for being with us. And to everyone else, enjoy the games at the weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.
Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar.